Hey guys, hell of an episode tonight. So this is going to be the Hardhome Season 5 Episode 8 review. And tonight it was Westeros meets The Walking Dead. Now all we need is Rick Grimes to come in with his .357 Magnum to put some bullets in their head. And stuff. So we started over Marine with Tyrion and Jorrah with Dany back in her throne room in the pyramid. And this is a pretty damn awesome scene to me. Dany's immediately taking the advice of Tyrion after a short talk, and he kind of wins her over a little bit by telling her own story about her past, and so it's kind of showing his knowledge of Westeros and history. But I think that kind of took her by surprise a little bit. Not that she completely trusts him yet, she won't for a while. So she heeds that advice immediately and says, okay, what would you do with Jorrah? And Jorrah is standing back there, and basically Tyrion vouches for him. And basically said if it wasn't for Jorrah and Varys, that she probably wouldn't be alive, and confessed that he thought that Jorrah loved her. She did spare his life and said, send him out of the city. So then of course he walks out and he looks down at the grayscale on his arm, which looks to be grown a little bit more, like he has a plan. And then of course later on we see him go back to his master that bought him off the slave ship and essentially offer himself to go fight in the main pit in Marine. So he wants to get back in front of Dany again. I don't know what his plan is with grayscale, or if he just looked at it thinking, okay, he's got a death sentence now, so he's got to do what he's got to do and risk death at the hands of Daenerys and obviously the fighters in the pit. I thought the private conversation with Tyrion was awesome. He basically conveys what kind of help she needs and that some of the things she's done is wise as far as opening the fighting pits back up, explaining that he knows the political side of things versus the war side of things, kind of going over his resume a little bit. So I thought it was very cool, and she gave that awesome speech that we had heard in the preview to Tyrion. That's exactly what I said before in one of my previous videos. I thought the speech in the preview was to Tyrion, so that turned out to be right. We're supposing this is the same day where he's already talking with her in private and counseling her, and she's already kind of accepted that role. He kind of gave Varys a shout out about how he was the one who was sending notes back and forth to Jorrah in season 1, but at the same time he was probably the one who ended up saving her life because he is part of this Targaryen restoration movement. So then we go over to Cersei and King's Landing. She's in her cell, wasting away. Honestly, I thought this would be fun to see her suffer, but it's really not. You kind of feel for her a little bit. You kind of do enjoy seeing her having to lick water off the floor because she's never had to do anything like that in her life. But at the same time, Cersei's not this character that you have absolute hatred for, either like Joffrey or now Ramsey. I thought once she got thrown in the dungeon, I would enjoy seeing her suffer, and you do to an extent, I guess, but not like you thought you would. So you kind of feel bad for her down there rotting away. This is going to give her some perspective on how the downtrodden and poor people live as compared to just being lucky and born into a royal family or being highborn. The cool thing was here that the Sept kept coming into her cell and trying to get her to confess, and she was slapping her around and then pouring the water on the floor. Of course she was licking it up off the floor after she left, still maintaining that she's the most powerful bitch in Westeros, and she's refusing to confess. So what that's doing is setting up her trial. And we know that Qyburn visited her as well, basically telling her, hey, there's a way out if you confess. But she's still refusing to confess to the High Sparrow, and this is going to set up the trial. So we know that he has been working on the mountain. I think she's still going to do her walk of shame. Again, this is kind of setting the trial with see if it's the mountain or if he goes by another name, which would be Robert Strong from the books. Frankenstein's under that blanket. And of course she's begging to see Tommen and Tommen to come see him, but Tommen, being the pussy that he is, he's sitting in his room crying with his teddy bear, so he won't even see anybody. He's not eating, so she's worried about him, which is kind of touching, I guess, in a way. But again, this is just setting up her trial, and then we're going to see the reemergence, I think, of the Mountain or Sir Robert Strong, if they choose to go with that character name. And then we go over to Arya. She's now with Jaqen, and she's actually playing the game. She's learned the game of faces a lot better. She's now on her first mission, which I mentioned before as well in one of my recent videos, that when he said that a girl is not ready to become no one, but a girl is ready to become someone else. So now she's on this mission visiting this guy on the dock, some kind of gambler, and she's told by Jaqen to spy on this guy. They're portraying it as if he gave her a vial of poison to perhaps kill this guy they're gathering information on, or perhaps it's just another test, we'll see. But it's cool to see her story advance a little bit more in this process of becoming a faceless man, although I don't think in the end be able to completely lose her previous identity as Arya Stark. And then back in Winterfell we have Reek coming into the room with Sansa again, and Sansa gets Reek or Theon to finally admit that he did not kill her brothers. that it was just two farm boys he had burnt so they couldn't tell. So she finds out for the first time that both her brothers Bran and Rickon are both still alive, although Theon didn't know where they were. So that gives her a little bit of hope, and now you're starting to see Theon talk like Theon again a little bit. I've mentioned this last few times as well, that you're seeing this character go from Theon to Reek and now back to Theon again, so you're starting to see him emerge, and he's talking about himself now in the third person a little bit, like Theon did this, Theon did that, but he's come out and remembering these things, so it's kind of setting up this alliance now. Then we move over to the Boltons and the war room, talk about Stannis and him marching to Winterfell. Roose Bolton thinks it's best that they stay there and just let Stannis and his army starve and freeze. They would never be able to siege Winterfell. However, Ramsey has a different idea, and he says he needs 20 good men to go on some type of mission to hit them first. So we'll see what happens with Ramsey and his plan with his 20 special ops guys. And then we have a pretty quick scene with Sam and Gilly up at Castle Black. Sam's getting treated for his injuries from the last big fight he had when he tried to save her from being raped. And then a very important thing to me, I think, is the Olly scene. So Olly comes in Sam's room and asks Sam about what Jon's plan is, and Sam tries to explain to him that he's in a tough situation and that overall it's a good thing because they're trying to recruit more men for this upcoming war, which they know is coming as far as the White Walkers. It just doesn't seem that no matter what Sam said to Olly that he really started to understand and get it. He's so hell-bent on getting revenge for his family being murdered, which is understandable. He just can't see the big picture. So there's a reason they're doing this with Olly. They don't take up screen time in this show for nothing. So I think that this is setting up a confrontation that we may see happen in episode 10, where I had mentioned before you have the Jon Snow camp, and now you have the anti-Jon Snow camp because they don't agree with him going out and trying to make peace with the wildlings. And I think Olly's going to be involved in that in a big way. But I'm guessing that Olly's going to play a pretty big role, let's just say in episode 10, when it comes to Jon Snow. I'll just say this, keep in mind that Sam had that line, he said something to the effect of, I've been watching out for Jon for 3 years. He always comes back. That's important. So then we had the major, finally badass battle of the season so far with Jon going to Hardhome. So he's going with Tormund Giantsbane on their agreed deal to go recruit the wildlings into their army in exchange for letting them come beyond the wall and settle lands. In agreement, of course, they have to join and fight the White Walkers when the time comes. Well, that time came a little bit early. Giantsbane walks in, so he meets up with the Lord of Bones, and he just says that we should gather the others and let's go have a talk. And basically the Lord of Bones starts ridiculing him, and he takes the staff from him and kills him with it, which was a pretty badass scene. And then he just threw it down and said, yeah, so again, let's just go gather the others and go talk. They end up going inside and talking with the leaders of the wildlings, and Jon Snow pleads his case, and they come to an agreement, and he offers the dragon glass as kind of a gift. And one of the wildlings asks what happened to Mance Rayder, and Jon said, I put an arrow in his heart. And of course he moved to go and kill Jon, and that's when Tormund Giantsbane stepped up and said, no, wait, his arrow was mercy. The Southern King, which he was referring to Stannis, wanted to burn him alive, but Jon saw that and put an arrow in his heart out of mercy to put him out of his misery. So that kind of sold the wildling leaders on the idea of joining up with the Crows. So most of the wildling leaders finally accept that through Giantsbane because they trust him and not necessarily Jon, but they realize it's the best option. But the Thins don't, and they walk out and they're loading everyone on the boats, and you see Stannis' ships out on the ocean, and they're getting everybody on boats and loading people up and their camping equipment, I suppose. Then of course they turn and see the mountains, and behind them there's a big kind of a snowdrift falling over the mountains, and they realize something's going wrong. And as many people rush into the gates of Hardhome as they can, they close the gate. So then it went to an episode of The Walking Dead, and they were making almost the exact same sounds of The Walking Dead, the whites were. So they're busting through the gate. Ends up being a pretty badass epic battle scene, really the first one this year we've seen so far. They're all fighting with each other, fighting against the whites, and that kind of cements the idea that, yeah, we need to work together, I think. They're fighting the whites, and then they look up and see that there's White Walkers on their dead horses on the mountaintop above looking down at them. They realize that, they see that, so Jon and them go for the dragon glass. And so Jon goes back inside to find the dragon glass, and a White Walker's in there. And ironically, the Thin leader was in there and says, okay, go get the glass, and pulls out his axe and goes to fight the White Walker. The White Walker immediately blocks his axe with his little Sub-Zero ice spear, and then, of course, kills him. So then him and Jon get into it. The White Walker throws him down. He gets to his sword. The White Walker is essentially going to come out, and you think, oh shit, he's going to kill him right there. And they had made a point previously in this fight to show that nothing could block his ice spear, his ice sword. but Jon's sword does, and the reason is it's made from Valyrian steel. If you remember when the Lord Commander gave it to Jon and put the wolf on it, he said this is Valyrian steel. So we know now that dragonglass and Valyrian steel are weapons against the White Walkers. So Jon kills a White Walker with his Valyrian steel sword. He kills his first White Walker, and hopefully there'll be many more to come. So that's a very big aha moment. Show-only watchers may not be aware of this, as this is a big kind of a piece of the storyline and kind of the in-game stuff as far as what kills the White Walkers, and dragonglass or obsidian, and of course Valyrian steel. Valyrian steel, again, coming from old Valyria, where the Targaryens originated, and it was made and forged with magic. Obviously that plays an important role since there's very little Valyrian steel in the Seven Kingdoms that's left. And then the ending scene. So the guy on top of the mountain wasn't just any old White Walker, he was Darth Maul without his tattoos. And this is the leader of the White Walkers, and he is called the Night's King. And so the Night's King is the guy, you've seen him before, you've seen him in the episode where he turns the baby into a walker by touching him with his fingernail. So real quickly for you show-only watchers, just a little background on the Night's King. He was actually a guy who was appointed to be the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and this was thousands of years ago. He apparently fell in love with a female other, or female White Walker, and then pronounced himself king and pronounced her his queen, and they ruled at one of the castles along the wall, which was called Night Watch, which has since been abandoned. And then for 13 years he ruled there as king and held the Night's Watch captive. So there's a longer backstory to the Night's King and who he is and who he may actually be. Because when he essentially formed this unholy union with this White Walker female, then he gave up his soul and became one of them. And rumor has it, according to Old Nan, that he may have in fact been a Stark. So Jon and them finally flee, get on a boat, head towards the ships where the battle's still taking place a little bit. The Night's King comes down and locks eyes with Jon, which I thought was a pretty badass moment, because he's essentially, I think, looking at one of his descendants, and he may not know that yet, and they may not even go that direction in the show. I have no idea. So sorry for a slight spoiler there if that's the case. But he locks eyes with him, and then he just raises his hands like this, and you see all the people that just died in that battle get right back up, and now they're part of his army. That was pretty cool, and it just went off like that. In my opinion, it's a pretty epic ending, pretty epic battle, and a pretty epic show altogether. I mean, a lot of stuff came together in this one they've been building up to, and you still got 2 more episodes to go as well. So I meant to keep this as short as I could, so yeah, let me know what you guys think. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And my big question for you guys is, what do you guys think is going to happen before the season's over as far as Jon, and perhaps will we see a bit of a mutiny in the Night's Watch with Jon and them returning to the Wall? Thanks again, you guys, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, I'd like to thank you guys, all you guys, for the support. Follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/smokescreenvids. Give me a shout out on Twitter at smokescreenvids. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.